Okay, good morning, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. We appreciate you all taking your time this morning to join us for our MTW public meeting. My name is Lindsay Meller. I'll be guiding our discussion today. We have our interim executive director, Debbie Berry, behind me.
Good morning.
So we are excited to share with you today. We are going to be recording today's meeting, so we'll post it on our website after the meeting. And I do have a PowerPoint that I'll be going through. So if you're on a computer and can see that, great. If you're joining us via phone, I'll be talking about everything that's on these slides, but we'll post them afterwards on the website as well. As we're going through, please feel free to ask questions. You can put it in the chat. We'll be watching that. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. And then at the end, we'll unmute everybody for questions as well and go from there. What's in the chat right now? I already have something.
It was me.
It was you.
Welcoming
Wonderful.
everyone.
Using our chat. Great. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So what is the MTW program? AMHA became an MTW housing authority in September. And what that does, it gives us the ability to change or modify our housing programs to better benefit Summit County and use our funding flexibly. So we can waive or change HUD rules and regulations to fit what meets our needs. So instead of Washington, D.C. deciding what's good for all of the housing authorities across the country, we can have more ownership over our decisions to decide what works here in Summit County. Any changes that we make have to work towards the 3 MTW goals or objectives, which are to reduce the cost it takes to run the program, encourage self-sufficiency for our participants through job training, educational programs, etc., and increase the housing choices available to our households. So we created an MTW vision statement to really guide the decisions that we make, what changes to the program that we want to do, and then to be able to evaluate how our changes are working. So AMHA envisions an MTW program that meaningfully increases local affordable housing choices, reduces administrative burden, and ultimately enhances the quality of housing and services that empower all to reach their full potential. And we're basing this on the same 3 MTW goals. So for cost effectiveness, we are looking at rent reform as a way to achieve greater efficiency and remove barriers, so we can have cost savings to create quality of life and mobility programs. For self-sufficiency, we are looking for programs and partnerships that increase opportunities so our participants can position themselves out of poverty. And finally, for housing choice, we envision a community where our investments preserve and improve affordable housing, increase housing opportunities, and stabilize families and neighborhoods. Next one. Here's just a quick time frame of kind of where we've been and where we're going. So AMHA joined this MTW program in September to have access to all these flexibilities. We're going to submit an MTW plan to HUD in April. So the things we're going to be discussing today are all of our proposed ideas. Since we are changing HUD rules and regulations, they have to approve all of those changes. So we'll submit it to them in April, and then they will hopefully approve it by the end of June, and all these changes would go into effect in July of 2022, so this summer. And then every year we'll be reviewing this MTW plan and updating it. So we'll add new things we think we need. If things are going well, we'll continue them. If they're not working, we can stop one of the changes. It's great. We'll have that annual moment to review it and see where we're headed. And then finally, we're going to be an MTW housing authority for at least the next 20 years. So we did sign a 20-year contract for all these flexibilities. And then after that, we will see where it goes. So let's start talking about some of the changes that are going to be happening. This first set, these are pre-approved MTW waivers. So HUD has said these are great ones to implement. We are pre-approving them. Let's move forward. So we've chosen 4 of those in this section that we're calling general streamlining waivers. The first one is allowing households to self-certify their assets up to $50,000. So you've been on our program a while. You know that some years you're allowed to just write down how much your assets are worth and how much interest you're earning. And some years you have to supply your checking account statement, your savings account statement, your 401k, any other, like a CD that you have, any of those things you have to supply. So this change will let you self-certify your assets every year, not have to supply your documents or bring in your bank statements. We'll be able to take your statement of that instead. The next three are only for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. They're specific to that program. The first one is called vacancy loss payments. In areas of opportunity, landlords that have a unit they are renting to a voucher holder, if that voucher holder moves out and they re-rent it to a new voucher holder within 3 months, we're going to offer them a vacancy payment. And what that money is for is almost to hold the unit so it will stay on our program, get a new voucher holder in there. So what we're looking to do is make sure that we keep good units, keep good landlords available to our voucher holders so they have more choices of where to rent a unit in Summit County. The next one is also for areas of opportunity. Units in those areas can have what's called a pre-qualifying unit inspection. So if a landlord owns a unit in that area and they would like to be on the program but have no voucher holder yet, they can call us, we'll go do an inspection. What that does is lets that landlord know what our inspection standards are. What does their unit need to be at or look like or ready to go for a voucher holder to move in? And if that inspection passes, it's good for 90 days. So if they do get an interested voucher holder that wants that unit, they don't have to wait for a new inspection. It's already passed, already ready to go. Right now, it takes about 2 weeks to get an inspection on a unit. So it really will decrease the amount of time it takes for that voucher holder to move into the new unit by already having a pre-qualified unit inspection done. And the last one in this section is right now HUD requires housing authorities to have a third-party contractor come in and do the inspections and rent reasonableness tests for any project-based voucher units that AMHA has an interest in. And we have the quality control measures in place and the software in place to do that all in-house. So we'll start doing that ourselves instead of having a third-party contractor to move through our process more quickly and provide really a continuity of service for our participants and won't get confused on who's coming to inspect their unit and when. It will all go through us instead. Do you want to unmute for a minute here? Are there any questions on these? We're going to unmute you all. If you want to ask a question, you can. Maybe.
I was just wondering, this is Devon Lewis, and I am a participant of the Housing Choice Program or voucher. And I was wondering, are these the only ideas that you guys are going to implement, or are you looking to incorporate other ideas in order to, facilitate this process?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So there are still several more we're going to go through. But is there anything in particular you had in mind that you were hoping to see on the first list?
Actually, I have an idea that I think would be feasible for your program, and it was something that I had to design for myself to find affordable, decent housing. So basically what I did was combine a person who was willing to purchase a property and rent it through Section 8. And then I had found someone who I already knew had a home, but it needed to be rehabbed. So that person was able to purchase this property cheap, where he was able to rehab it and then accept your rent, because most of these landlords don't like to do Section 8 because they can't get the full rent. Mm-hmm. So if they're able to get these properties cheaper, then they're more willing to offer these properties to people on Section 8. So that was just an idea I had. Great. And then there are a lot of properties. I don't know, I've spoken with the land bank program. And there are so many empty properties, behind on taxes. And I've spoken with the lady Tiffany, and she was saying that if I knew someone who was interested in these properties that they haven't already obtained possession, there's also a way that they can, present and make it known, pay a fee, and then the land bank, if they can, will get possession of those properties. So that's another way, because there's really no reason why there should be so many people on the list that can't find a place to live. And then we have all these properties that are in the city that are sitting vacant, so that's
Right.
just one of, but that's all.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like maybe we can't unmute you all at the same time, but you can unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask the question at this point. And if not, we'll go on to some more changes that are coming. But I will give a few pauses throughout in case we want to ask questions before moving on. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as part of AMHA joining the MTW program, we are going to be part of a rent study for the next 7 years to compare if there's a better way to calculate your rent portion, a better way that's more understandable for you all, a way that's easier or faster for us in doing it. So that's what this rent study is aimed at finding out. It's going to apply to the public housing program and to the housing choice voucher program, to current households and to new participants coming on for 1 year. And everyone who is eligible will be randomly assigned by a lottery to one of 2 groups. The first group we're calling standard rent. That means rent's calculated the same way that it is right now. You'll still have your income recertification every year. And then the other group will be in the tiered rent group, which is the new way of rent calculation. They'll have their rent determined by income tiers, and they're going to have their income recertification every 3 years instead of every year. So there are some households that are going to be excluded from this study. So they are still a part of MTW, still a part of the other flexibilities we're going to talk about, but they're not part of this tiered rent study. That's elderly and disabled households, and they do include near elderly in that. So anyone ages 56 or older, head of household, co-head, or spouse. Special purpose voucher holders in the Housing Choice Voucher Program are excluded. So homeownership, shelter plus care, mainstream, mod, MASH, FUP. Mixed eligibility families, households living in a jobs plus development. So in public housing at Summit Lake property, Dorothy Jackson, Relax Circle, Lakeshore duplexes, those are all excluded. Households that are paying public housing flat rent, or households currently on an EID, earned income disallowance, or are current FSS participants. All those groups are excluded. That leaves about 3,100 households across both programs combined that will be a part of the study. Again, about half are going to be standard rent, the way we do things now, every year income recertification, and about half are going to go to the new tiered rent method we're going to discuss in a second, with every 3-year income recertification.
I have a question.
Yes.
How come you guys are excluding everyone and not accepting everyone, but you guys want everybody to be a part of the new program? Why is all these people being excluded and not being accepted as everyone else?
Great question. So this was all determined by HUD of who was a part of the study. So all the things that I listed, do you mind going back a slide, Katie, would interact in some way with what they're trying to study. So elderly and disabled households generally have less earned income from employment than non-elderly disabled households. I think they're really trying to see who can increase their income on this program. The special purpose voucher holders, those special vouchers have extra rules attached to them, so they couldn't be a part of the study. Mixed eligibility families have someone in the household who is not an eligible citizen, so we count their income differently as well. And then the Jobs Plus, flat rent, EID, and FSS also all work differently with the way we calculate income. So all of these groups couldn't be part of the tiered rent study, but they will still have the other benefits, the things we talked about on the previous slide, and a few more that are coming later on. And then there are pieces of this tiered rent study, if we feel like it's really working well and benefiting everyone, we could apply a few of these changes across the board. So for example, this group I mentioned will have their income recertification every 3 years. If that seems to be really helpful, we can apply that to more groups by our choice. So some things like this particular list, we had no choice in, but other things we can look to expand more broadly. So we could look to expand like the every 3-year recertification to all groups later on. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does, but it still leaves out people that really can't afford everything. And even though you guys just signed with AMHA, why wasn't we notified for this ahead of time? And now we just received the letters for us to get on Zoom to understand all this. I don't really understand that part.
Sure. So we've been working on this since about 2019. So there were previous meetings in a prior year. So it kind of depends maybe when you came on the program, if you didn't get the prior letters. But when we applied for this program, we had, I think, 3 public meetings and letters sent out for that. Our website continually updates with information on MTW. So there's a lot happening when you're on any of these programs. There's a lot to manage with your regular life, of the things that you're doing, of course, to keep track of all of our rules and changes. So we're trying to offer things like this meeting, so we have a chance to explain it person to person versus just reading it online or getting a letter that's available to you. So the whole housing authority is MTW now. After our application process, we were accepted. And then part of that is this income tier study. So the tier study we have to participate in for the next 7 years. Again, it's just the smaller group of households. And then all the rest of the changes we're talking about today are ones that are flexible. So we're making the changes because we think they'll be beneficial for our households, for our staff, the way we process changes, things like that. And if we see that it's not working, then we can edit those. So every year there'll be a meeting like this, where we'll go over the next year's changes and talk about how the previous year went, what worked, what didn't work, what are we still waiting on, and looking ahead to the next year, what are we wanting to change there as well. This will be an ongoing process. And if you're interested in participating, I mean, we welcome additional feedback too throughout the year. We do have an MTW phone line set up and an email address. So if you have questions or suggestions throughout the year, we can take those as well to include as part of the yearly plan. So let's get into what the income tier method means. So in this method, all households are going to be grouped by their income into tiers or levels. And within each level, all the households will pay the same rent portion. And we'll show you what the table looks like in a second, so you can see what that means if you're on a computer. For this group, there are no deductions from their income. And we're going to calculate the rent portion based on the last 12 months of income. So right now for rent calculation, we do a current snapshot, usually the last 1 to 2 months of your income, and project what you're going to make for the next year. Because this group is not going to come in for an income recertification for 3 years, a much longer period of time, we want to really see what the earning potential is. So if we view your income for the past 12 months, we can capture when it was high, when it was low, when it was in between, and really average that out to see what you're normally able to earn. And then use that 12 months of income to project for the next 3 years. So it offers stable rent for 3 years. But if there is a reason that your income goes down, we can lower it, what are called hardships. If your income does decrease, we know not everybody has stable income for 3 years. That will be built in as well. So there are 3 waivers or changes to HUD rules that are a part of this rent reform study, this tiered rent study. So first is to switch to tiered rent. Again, just for the smaller portion of households, it's about 3,100 households total across both programs that qualify for part of this study. There's also elimination of deductions. So there will no longer be dependent deductions or childcare deductions, things like that. But to balance that out, we're lowering the percentage of income that we currently count towards rent. So right now, everyone pays about 30% of their income towards rent, but they also get these deductions. So for the tiered rent group, not getting deductions, they're going to pay 28% approximately of their income. And then the last one is the alternative recertification schedule, and that just means every 3 years income recertification instead of every year. So if you're on a computer and able to see it, this is what the tiered rent table looks like. So you can find where your income falls and just slide over in the table to see what your rent portion is going to be. So for instance, if my 12 months of income was $11,000, that puts me in tier 5. I can slide over and my rent is $281. That amount is always going to be reduced by your utility allowance and utilities that you're responsible for. So if you pay gas and electric, that comes out of that rent, that $281, and lowers your actual out-of-pocket rent amount. If my income for that 12 months was $12,000, I'm still in the same tier, tier 5. I still pay $281. One more slide. So what are the benefits to these income tiers? Why is HUD studying this? Why are we participating in this? There's some nice options here. So if your income increases within the same tier or level you're already in, your share of rent does not increase because you're still in the same tier. If your income increases into a higher income tier, your share of rent won't change until that triennial every 3rd year recertification. So in between those recertifications, that 3-year window, if your income goes up, your rent does not go up. Okay, it's stable rent for 3 years. The income review happens every 3 years, as I mentioned, instead of every year. So the benefit there is you're not doing an online form, gathering your documents, coming in for an appointment every year. It's now only every 3 years. That reduces the burden on these families as well. So during that 3-year cycle, it's stable rent. You know what's coming, you know what you have to pay. If you are able to increase your income, you can pay off debt, build your savings, etc. Now we're also hoping to have a plan to connect these groups with services. So if we're not seeing you for 3 years, we do want to make sure you have your needs met, job training, credit building, etc., things like that. Let's go one more slide. So I think an important point, what I would be wondering, if this was for my household, is what if my income decreases? There's a lot of great benefits built in if you're able to increase your income, but what if your income decreases? You lose your job, your hours get cut back at work. There are going to be hardships. So right now you all are used to income changes and change of family statuses. This will be a little bit different. It's called a hardship. And they're meant to be temporary because again, this is a 3-year time of stable rent. So there will be an option of what are called automatic hardships. If when you come in for your reexamination, recertification, your current snapshot of income, that last month or two, is lower than your full 12 months of income we're looking at, we'll put you in that lower income tier for 6 months and then bump you up to where you normally would be based on your 12 months of prior income. So let's say you have been working at a job. So looking at your 12 months of income, you have all of that income. But last month you lost your job, now you're unemployed. Well, right now in this current moment, you can't pay rent like you were working. So you would get an automatic hardship lasting for 6 months, putting you down in a low income tier. And then we would expect in that 6 months, you're probably looking for a new job. You could find something and pay normal rent. Then you can also apply for additional hardships as needed. And this would be similar to the income change of family status process you're used to now. If your income decreases to a lower tier, if you have childcare expenses totaling $2,500 or more for the year, if you have a large family, so 6 or more dependents, or an adult in your household becomes a newly full-time student and has income, those are all reasons for hardships. And those are going to last for 12 months that you can apply for. All these hardships can be renewed. So let's say you did lose that job last month and you go at 6 months or 12 months with your lower rent, but the job market is tough. You didn't find anything new yet. You can renew that hardship and keep it going. Excuse me. So for example, if my income was $24,000, that would put me in tier 10. My rent portion is $524 in that tier. But then my hours get cut back at work and my income is now $18,500. That drops me down to tier 8 and my rent portion is now $469. I'm going to stay at that tier 8, $469 in rent until my hardship is over. And then I'm going to go back to my original tier of 524. Okay, so again, the goal is here stable rent for 3 years. That tier 10 is my 3 years of rent, 524. But if something happens, I can drop down temporarily, get things back together. Hopefully my hours go back up at work and I can return to my original rent portion. So let's pause here for questions. That's a lot of information and it's really a new way to think about how we do things, how you all pay rent, how we calculate it. Any questions? You can do that at the end if you want. Okay, so we'll go on to the next section. So this first part was all the pre-approved waivers. So HUD has already said these are great ones to use, but there will be times that we need to make additional changes. So this next section.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I had a question about the website. You know, I'm on it, but I can't find this program. How do I get to the program? So I can
Sure. If
see
you're on,
something.
if you're on our main AMHA page, like the home page when you get
Yeah.
there are scrolling titles across the top. They kind of keep
Right.
moving. There's a coronavirus one. The fourth one over is MTW.
Okay, I'll find
Okay, it has a bunch of
the
people
one-
faces. And then we are adding a new link as well that'll be permanent at the bottom. And if you click learn more there, it'll take you to what's available right now. And probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a lot more info up there as well.
Well, actually, I'm looking at AMHI House public housing program at Metropolitan, and then down the bottom it say Course Association AMHA Home. Let me go back one more.
Yeah, you just want to
'cause I
go to
was
straight
searching.
akronhousing.org, and that's our main homepage.
Oh, wait a minute. Say it again.
www.akronhousing.org.
Oh, Akron Housing.
Mhm.
I
You were just exploring something else, having fun, huh?
was at AMHA.
Yep, our website is
Oh.
akronhousing.org.
Okay. We can get back to the administration. No, here it goes, akronhousing.org.
There you go.
Okay, we can get back to the meeting. All
Okay,
right.
great. Just let us know if you hit another issue.
Okay.
So these next set of waivers, there are official names for them that are called safe harbor waivers and agency specific waivers. And it just means that they're not pre-approved or making some changes. So let's go to our next slide. First, we're going to discuss safe harbor waivers. So when HUD has these pre-approved waivers, like the ones we already discussed, they have certain requirements for each one. But sometimes those requirements are not going to fit with what we think would work best here in Summit County, or in our case, may not fit with this rent reform study that we're a part of. So if we need to change just a piece of these pre-approved waivers, we can request what's called a safe harbor waiver. And we are requesting 3 of those this year. The first one is part of the tiered rent. So to do tiered rent, HUD's prescribed requirement is that rents are set to be affordable at the bottom, the low end of each tier. But for our rent reform study, we're required to make that affordable at the middle of each tier. So we're requesting that change. Secondly, when we do these every 3-year income recertifications, the normal requirement says we have to do an income change down if your income decreases by 10% or more. We're changing that because of this tiered rent schedule and where it kind of fits in placing you in different levels. And instead, we're doing the hardship plan that we discussed on the previous slide. And the last one is the self-certification of assets. It's pre-approved for any public housing and housing choice voucher household to self-certify their own assets. We are also asking that applicants can self-certify their assets. So we spend a lot of time verifying debit card balances, checking accounts for our applicants. when it's not really impacting their eligibility for the program or what their rent portion is. So we're asking to allow them to self-certify as well. Are there any questions on these? We kind of already covered all of them on the previous slides, but these little changes that we're making to them.
Lindsay, can I make a comment?
Mhm.
It's Bernadette. I just wanted to share what a great impact this asset self-certification is going to have on processing our applicants. As a person who has processed applicants here at AMHA for a long time, the process of verifying assets, getting the right information, sending verifications out for interest rates on asset accounts really makes the process take much longer than what it should. So I think that's going to be a relief to our folks that are working here trying to assist people moving from the waiting list into housing.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
And I will say that this particular one, at least for current participants, almost every housing authority adopts it because we all know it's easier and faster for staff. It's easier on our households to self-certify their assets. So hopefully someday it will apply to all housing authorities. So the last grouping of waivers are called agency-specific waivers. These are ideas that we can come up with. It allows housing authorities to go beyond all these pre-approved prescribed MTW waivers and think of new innovative activities. So HUD is really looking for all MTW housing authorities to think up new things, try new ideas, what works, what doesn't work. And if it does work, we can make changes across the country for other housing authorities as well. If HUD sees these things are working really well, we can impact some broader change. So AMHA is requesting 3 agency-specific waivers, which are things that we've come up with or other housing authorities have used well to meet our local needs. So the first one of those is really going to be internal. You won't see much impact on your households. It's called a local EIV method. EIV stands for Enterprise Income Verification. And that, along with something called an income validation tool, are tools that are given to us by HUD and show all of our households' income. So we can see income from employment, Social Security, and unemployment on those reports. And they're very useful in catching any unreported income or start dates. But the problem with them is that they're not current. They're usually 6 months behind. And HUD requires us to review these reports very regularly when they're often so out of date. So we're going to reduce how often we look at them when it's not going to help us in our rent calculation. So if you came in today and said, I lost my job, if I checked this EIV tool, it wouldn't be on there yet that it's ended or that you've stopped getting income from it because it's too far behind. So it's not so useful to spend staff time pulling and reviewing those reports when they aren't going to help us actually process your changes. The second one here is called a local verification method. We are going to let all verifications of income, of deductions, et cetera, be good for 180 days. Right now, how long verifications like pay stubs or a bank statement that we talked about, how long those are good for varies by department, by which program you're on. So we're making that consistent and making it for a longer period of time. So having to supply new proof over and over again as things get out of date. And then we're also going to let any fixed income, so Social Security, SSI money, VA pensions, PERS pensions, things that don't change the amount of money per month, those verifications will be good for a full calendar year. So we know that you get a letter saying your Social Security will be this for all of 2020. There's no need for us to ask you for a new letter over and over again when the money isn't changing. And then the last piece of this one is we are updating our verification hierarchy. So HUD tells us a very specific method to go through and how to verify. And there's 6 different levels to that to verify your income, assets, deductions. We're going to condense that down to 4 levels. So it'll be faster for us to move through it and less things to ask of you. So we're letting, if it was a job, for instance, the pay stubs that you bring us will be equally as good as your employer completing a form, which is equally as good as us calling your employer and getting your rate of pay and hours worked per week. All of those are now going to be equal and easier for us to get through. And then the last change for an agency-specific waiver, and our last change overall actually, It's only for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. There is a rule in that program right now that if you are at 0 HAP, and that means we are not paying any housing assistance for you, you're paying the whole rent by yourself, you can only stay on the program for 6 months, and then you're automatically graduated off. And while there's a benefit to that, 6 months is a really short window of time to make sure you have stable income and can really transition off the program successfully. So we're going to extend that time to 12 months and let households stay on the program, paying their full rent for 12 months. That way they can make sure their income is going to stay stable when they leave the program, help them feel confident in paying their own rent by themselves for that long period of time, and hopefully successfully transition off more easily. So I'm sorry, can you say that again?
That you been in the program after working for 12 months or
Okay, I'm only catching part of it because for some reason we're kind of losing you cutting in and out, but I think that you asked about they have to be working for 12 months.
Yes, and you have to be, I said, if you're working for 12 months, you get credit from the program, or understand how you explain that?
Sure. So to graduate off the program, so right now the way it works, it will be the same, it's just a longer period of time now, 12 months. We do send out a warning letter to let everybody that is at this point know you've been paying the full rent by yourself for this amount of time so far. And as of this coming date, you'll be off the Housing Choice Voucher Program. When they graduate off the program, they can always still reapply. They leave in good standing, but that housing assistance is no longer needed because they've been able to pay their own rent for 12 months due to their income, whether that is working or other kinds of income, child support, et cetera, all adds up. And then if they would need housing assistance in the future, they could reapply. But since we're not needing to pay any of their rent, we can use that voucher for a different household that has more need in getting housing subsidy paid for them. That makes sense. Hopefully I answered your question in there. I'm sorry that we couldn't hear you very well. If there's any other questions, feel free to hop off mute. Do you want to try the request them all to unmute?
Hello.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm okay. So you work for 12 months after that you've been denied for the program or you're terminated from the program.
Mm-hmm. We're still kind of cutting in and out, so I'm trying to catch your main words so I can hopefully answer the right question for you. And I can give you a number afterwards if we can't reach you, that you can give us a call on as well. So if you leave the program because of the 0 HAP where you're graduated, you're eligible to reapply right away. And that's different from if you lose your housing subsidy due to like a violation of a program rule. So if you're terminated from a housing program, you have to wait 3 years to reapply and then wait on the wait list. But if you graduate off because you've been paying the full rent on your own, that's obviously a positive thing, not a negative. So you are able to reapply right away. Depending on what your income is, you may or may not qualify, but you would be eligible to reapply.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. Thank you so much.
Oh, and now we can hear you beautifully. I'm glad that I got to your question. I'm so sorry about that.
You know why? Because I'm in a building and I'm on the 10th floor and I was inside the apartment. I just came out figuring that'd help.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad that I answered it for you. I'm sorry about that. If there are any other questions, we'd be happy to answer. And then if you do have time and you'd like more information, you can go to our website. As I mentioned before, it's www.akronhousing.org. And there is a separate moving to work page. So if you go to our homepage, there's a scrolling information across the main part of that. And there is an MTW, or moving to work is what it stands for, item you can click on. And then we're also adding a permanent link to it on the main page as well. If you have more questions you didn't want to ask today, we do have an information phone line. You can leave a voicemail and we'll get back to you with those questions. The number for that is 330-825-6987. And then we also have an MTW email address. You can email us any questions or comments. That's mtw@akronhousing.org. And again, we welcome any feedback that you might have, good, bad, or otherwise. Any other questions or comments today before we wrap it up?
I don't think no, but someone said thank you.
Excuse me, I did have one question.
Yeah.
I see that they have another meeting on March the 1st. So after this next meeting, will we, is that the only meeting that the public will be able to be involved with? The next
Yeah.
one?
Yes, so these are both the same meetings, the same slideshows, same presentation. We just did a
Okay.
daytime one and an evening one to make sure both were offered.
Okay,
And then
gotcha.
we'll submit our plan in April, and then we'll do this again, probably early fall, late summer for next
Okay.
year's, late summer, next year's plan.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for your time, and we appreciate your feedback. And feel free to get a hold of us if you have more comments. Thank you.
Thanks.